now I want to introduce Ellen Johnson. And I want to tell you that Ellen Johnson, how many of you knew Ellen from previous lives? She's the past president of American Atheists. She's an enormously creative woman, always has been. Ellen knows how to get certain things done, or how to try to get certain things done. She's not the least bit timid when it comes time for her to look someone in the face and say, here's what I want. She has twice testified before the United States Commission on Civil Rights. She has been a guest on a vast number of TV shows, including a Barbara Walters special, that's pretty special, and C-SPAN's prestigious public affairs program, and the Washington Journal, just to mention a few TV shows. She's a master at creative ideas, which I was just saying. In 2002, she produced the very first March on Washington, D.C. for atheists, the very first time that atheists ever marched in Washington, D.C. That was her doing. She also produced in 2005 the very first atheist in Foxholes, because we keep hearing there are no atheists in Foxholes. Well, I wish there weren't, but there are. And so she proved that to be true. However, in 2005, I think 2003, she established the first political action committee for secular Americans. That's us. And today it's called Enlighten the Vote. And she serves as its executive director. And I'd like to also say that in 1998, she met with the Office of Public Liaison for the Clinton White House to discuss the subject of giving atheists a place at the table. We're still waiting for an answer there. Ellen is an honorary associate of the Rational International and an honorary board member of Scouting for All. And we all know that's a national organization seeking to end atheist and LGBT discrimination within the Boy Scouts. But today, Ellen is here to ask you some hard questions. She's going to ask you, are you tired of being ignored by the politicians? Are you tired of the religious right always having the upper hand in your community, your place of business, your public schools, and public policy in our country? Ellen is certain that we have the power to prevent these constitutional violations, those violations that directly affect us, if not all Americans in the end. Her presentation today is, let's play hardball. Ellen Johnson. Do you want this?
Thank you.
Do you want this in here?
Would you like to be able to curtail the spread of religious proselytization of our children in our public schools, curb government-promoted proselytizing in prisons, stop military functions from being used for religious rituals, eliminate the special rights, protections, privileges, and tax breaks for the religious, and have a strong voice in our nation's public policy with regard to these issues? Are you tired of the stress that being an atheist in a majority religious nation gives you? How many of you have come here today because you want this kind of change in America? Good, because I'm here today to talk about how we can do this. We have the power and ability to prevent the constitutional violations that affect us, stop the enactment of special rights legislation for the religious, and to have politicians court our votes. At the same time, we can do things that make it a little easier to live as an atheist in a nation with so much religiosity. I want you to listen closely to what I have to say. For if you do what I am about to suggest, you will see more positive change for our cause in the next 5 years than our entire movement has seen in the last 50 years. You will leave here empowered and able to reduce your stress, and you will see politicians asking you what they can do for your votes. There are 3 things to know. The first is to use your power. The second, play hardball. And the third, alter your focus. First, a famous philosopher once said, "No one takes advantage of you without your permission." No one takes advantage of you without your permission. And that famous philosopher was, of course, advice columnist Dear Abby. We are a big voting bloc, which makes us politically powerful, yet we squander this power. According to BeliefNet, the seculars are the non-religious atheist and agnostic voter. In 2004, it's the only date for which I can get this kind of information, secular voters were 47% Democrats, 27% Independents, 26% Republicans. And it's the independent voter who is the crucial voter in the general election. With 27% of us being independents, the politicians should be courting our votes. We were 12% of voters. Latinos were 5%. Jews, 2%. Black Protestants, 8%. Moderate evangelicals, 9%. Catholics and Protestants were both 7%. The seculars had the highest numbers of all of these groups. The only group that was larger than us was the religious right, who were 15% of the voters in 2004. Non-religious Americans are increasing in numbers every year and in every state in America. The only other group which is increasing are the Muslims. All other religions are basically losing adherents. According to CBS News, in 2012, we backed President Obama by massive margins, 6 in 10 voters, or 62% of this group. But the seculars are the only voting bloc in America that accepts being ignored by the politicians who we keep in office. We have the votes to be courted by them, but so far we have been squandering this potential power. So, as Arlene said, let's flex our 12% political muscle. What is the best way to do this? I think that we should suppress the vote. Yep, let's suppress the vote. This means that we should stand together, the national organizations, and state that unless and until we hear what we want to hear from the politicians who want our votes, we'll stay home on Election Day. We'll stay home. And they will lose all of those votes. If we all say this, I'm not saying they have to put out press releases saying what they're going to do for atheists. Just call me. Call me, text me, email me. Send me a letter saying, Ellen, I will defend, if you deliver the votes to me, I'll support the Establishment Clause and the civil rights of atheists. That's all I'm asking for. In the last midterm election, when the Democrats did poorly, the Hispanic voters did not turn out in large enough numbers to help them. Why? Because the Democrats ran away from immigration reform. They were afraid it would hurt them with the right-of-center voter. And what happens? The Hispanics stayed home. Who lost? Democrats. See what happens when you stay home? Now the Democrats are working hard to get the support of the Hispanic voter. This is how you send a message. Famous basketball legend Bill Russell once said, "The idea is not to block every shot. The idea is to make your opponent believe you might block every shot. Politics is all about perception. So way ahead of the election, we say, unless we hear what we want to hear from you, we're not going to vote. I don't care if you do vote. It's perception. Let them think we're not going to vote. It's up to them. They're politicians. It's their job to know which side their bread is buttered on, or whatever the phrase is, okay? It's their job to know. Will they lose or won't they lose if they ignore us, if we stay home? Let them figure it out. This is the same thing as a voter's guide, which says you shouldn't vote for certain candidates. The only difference is that there are hardly any candidates we can vote for who will support and defend the Establishment Clause and our civil rights. Voters' guides should not guide us to the lesser of two evils. Just because a candidate might seem progressive because they're Democrats, independents, or even Green Party candidates doesn't mean that they will support us on the issues. How many of them do? They don't. They know that they've got our votes in the bag. They know that we'll vote for them, and then they can take us for granted, which is what they do. And we let them do it. Now, if you are fearful about how not voting may hurt politicians and the makeup of Congress, are you fearful of how this will affect the Supreme Court? Then you have just confirmed that you belong to one of the most powerful voting blocs in America. If a politician cannot say they will support us defend our civil rights and the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, are we really willing to give them our votes? And if we are, we can't complain. We can't complain when the politicians continue to ignore us. We can't complain about all those things that the religious are doing that we want to see changed. We can't complain if we keep throwing our votes away. Don't let anyone tell you that this is not the time for this. Don't let anyone tell you that you must continue to sit on the sidelines and not flex your political muscle. Don't let anyone tell you that you must put every other cause ahead of your own. Will this work? Yes. Will your favorite politician lose an election? Perhaps. Will this be the last time that our votes are taken for granted? You betcha. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something because you're an atheist. The religious depend on our political complacency and acquiescence, so why are we giving it to them? It is our time, and the ball is at our feet. So let's play hardball, and let's play to win. That's my second point. Play hardball. Consider two recent state church separation cases brought by our side. The first one out of Greece, New York, Greece v. Galloway, involved official prayers at town council meetings, and the other involved steel beams in the shape of a cross that are a permanent part of the 9/11 Museum in New York City. In both cases, the plaintiffs objected to the prayers and the crosses, yet in neither case did they ask that the prayers be stopped or the cross be removed. Why not? In the town prayers case, the plaintiffs, an atheist and a Jew, argued that when it came time to giving prayers, the town preferred Christians over other prayer givers, and that the town sponsored sectarian prayers over prayers that referred only to a generic God. Our side did not complain about the prayers per se. Linda Stevens was the atheist plaintiff, and Susan Galloway was the Jewish plaintiff. The case was brought by Americans United. I was told that they did want the organized prayer stopped, but they didn't fight for that. I spoke to Ms. Stevens, the atheist, and she really did want all the prayers stopped, but she was told that they could not ask for that because it wouldn't work. So they said that she and Ms. Galloway had to call themselves other prayer givers in the case. So the case became one of what kind of prayer and not about stopping the prayers. The Supreme Court ruled against them, as you know, for two primary reasons. First, they said that there already was equal access for other kinds of prayers and that no one was shut out of the prayer process. And even worse, the court said, too bad if you don't like sectarian prayers. Too bad, because they had held in 1983 in a case called Marsh v. Chambers that prayers were perfectly constitutional. Remember this case, Marsh v. Chambers. Marsh v. Chambers declared that legislative prayers by paid chaplains were okay because it was a tradition. So when it comes to religion, tradition makes things constitutional. The High Court chose to use a tradition test instead of the three-pronged lemon test to decide if the prayers were constitutional. So instead of asking if the prayers were an excessive entanglement with religion, had a secular legislative purpose, or had the primary effect that neither advanced nor inhibited religion, which are the three tests in lemon, the justices asked, is it a tradition? They had to use the tradition test because the prayers would never be found to be constitutional under lemon. And the justices weren't going to let organized prayers be found to be unconstitutional. Because Marsh v. Chambers allows prayers at town council meetings, Americans United figured they couldn't win a challenge to the prayers. So instead of at least trying, they asked for a compromise, which they thought was the lesser of two evils. Additionally, the High Court justified the organized prayers by saying that there wasn't any government coercion to pray because people could leave the room if they didn't like it. There may not have been coercion to pray, but in the landmark case, Supreme Court case of Murray versus Corlett, the court held that leaving the room was not an acceptable solution to a violation of the United States Constitution. If you recall, this is the famous school prayer case brought by Madalyn O'Hair and Bill Murray against mandatory prayers and Bible reading. The school said to Bill Murray, if he didn't like it, he could leave the room, and the court held 8-1, you can't do that. That doesn't solve the problem. But yet in Greece, the court said that you could do that. No, they should have argued against that. This brings me to the second case. American Atheists filed suit against the steel beams in the shape of a cross that is part of the 9/11 museum. They argued that it was unconstitutional, and in their brief, they clearly demonstrated that it violated all three prongs of the lemon test. First, there was an excessive government entanglement with religion because the Port Authority, a government entity, donated the rusty girders to the museum for display. And the Port Authority played an integral part in the planning and execution of the display. Second, there wasn't a secular legislative purpose. The only purpose of the cross is veneration, and has been viewed as a gift from a god, which leads me to wonder, why this god took so much time to plant the dumb things there, yet couldn't stop the attack from happening in the first place, but we all thought the same thing. And third, this veneration has the purpose of advancing Christianity, being the only religion represented, thus violating the third prong. Remember, an action only has to violate one prong, one of the three, to be found to be in violation of the Constitution. These steel beams violated all three. So they had a great case. What did American Atheists do with the strong case they had? They told the court that they didn't want the steel beams removed. You heard that right. And you have no idea how much it pains me to think that it was American Atheists who did that. I was told that they would have asked for the cross to be removed, but that Jewish and Hindu plaintiffs got involved in the case and were asking for equal access for their logos. I mean symbols. And for some reason, that made American Atheists think they had to do the same thing. Again, what the hell? American Atheists also considered making this an Article 6 religion test case and an Equal Protection Clause case. They were using everything but the one thing that they had that was a good case. This is not equal access, equal protection, or religion test case. It is an Establishment Clause case that needed to be adjudicated under the Lemon test. David Silverman has decided not to, against appealing this to the Supreme Court because he thought, well, the court would rule against us 5-4. He doesn't know that. You never know. You don't know how the court is going to decide. You never know. Besides, If you have a strong case, but you think the court's going to rule against you 5-4, and you can't convince one justice, then shame on you. Oh, somebody sent me to law school. When you file a case, you file it to win, not quit. Then I remembered who the lawyer was who filed the case. It was Edwin Kagan, who I knew well. I know his legal philosophy because he was the legal director for American Atheists when I was its president. We disagreed many times over constitutional issues. Edwin always wanted to play it safe, never wanting to bring cases he thought we could lose, and always wanting to settle instead of fight. Well, I get this. This is the way a lot of attorneys work. Get what you can get. Edwin was afraid to set bad legal precedent with a loss. Okay, you lose, and then the problem becomes part of the law, all right? But not challenging the violation allows the problem to remain, as if you had set a bad legal precedent. So the violation becomes a de facto law of the land. And again, you do not know if you're going to lose or win. So I say you have to try. Moreover, the courts and the public need to know where we stand, honestly, where we stand. We have to go before the courts and make our case. If we lose, we try again. If we always play it safe, nothing will ever change. Tell me, what has changed in the last 40 or 50 years? As long as AA would challenge this cross as an equal access case, and I'm glad they aren't appealing it, because they could have won that as an equal access case, and then if you ask me, we'd all be screwed. The judges in that case said, quote, "The stated purpose of displaying the cross at ground zero is to tell the story of how some people used faith to cope with the tragedy, and that's genuine, and an objective observer would understand the purpose of the display to be secular." Oh, baloney. So some people used religion to cope with the tragedy. So what? Some people used alcohol. Should we erect a display of Jack Daniels at the site? So what now? After reading the briefs and decisions in these two cases, it is apparent that to the courts, we don't exist. Are we going to continue to allow the courts to ignore us? Does our movement have a plan? Do we have a strategy? No. We don't have one because we don't consider ourselves capable of winning. Linda Stevens was told that she could not get the prayers removed and that she shouldn't try. We assumed we would lose. Unless we stop accepting less than what is right, we will keep being pushed around, and deservedly so. If you argue for your limitations, they will be yours. If you argue for your limitations, they will be yours. We need to play hardball, and we need to play to win. So here's my plan. Legislative prayers hinge on Marsh v. Chambers. If we want to stop them, we have to overturn Marsh v. Chambers. We have to bring case after case that challenges it until it's overturned. Marsh v. Chambers for us, is the equivalent of Plessy versus Ferguson for blacks. Here's how. Plessy allowed separate but equal for 58 years before it was overturned in 1954 in Brown v. Board of Education. Marsh has only been around for 31 years. The esteemed Justice Thurgood Marshall was part of a group of lawyers who had a plan, and they had a strategy to overturn Plessy. In lawsuit after lawsuit, they challenged the assumption that separate was equal. They showed that it was not, and finally overturned Plessy versus Ferguson. They planned to win. They planned to win. Our plan and strategy must be to challenge the assumptions made in Marsh about prayers and tradition. In order for this to be successful, we need to be more vocal about our objections to legislative prayers. To the legislative prayers, and not ask for equal access or be other prayer givers. We have to say that legislative prayers are the problem. The court and the country need to feel our presence to the point that it becomes clear that in the second millennium, prayer does not square in the modern era. Prayer does not square in the modern era. The tradition argument cannot prevail. Slavery was a tradition. The lack of voting rights for women and blacks was a tradition. Justifying anything on the basis of tradition is so weak that overturning it should not be a heavy lift. I don't care how old the precedent is. I don't care how long it will take to do this, because it's true what they say. Go big or go home. For what else is there? So what about equal access as a solution to these cases? Is it okay to ask for generic prayers? Is it okay for us to give our kind of a prayer? The question should be, what's wrong with asking for what is right first? What other group asks for less than what is right? Did blacks ever argue for separate and equal? Again, argue for your limitations and they will be yours. Eddie Tabash, who was chair of the legal counsel for Americans United and the counsel on record for an amicus brief in this case submitted by the Center for Inquiry, justified the equal access approach in both cases by saying that the Establishment Clause is always about the equality of atheists. No, it's not. The Establishment Clause says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. There is nothing in the Establishment Clause per se that speaks to equality. All Americans are supposed to be equal before the law. That's a given. This is what he said in regards to the steel beams case. To say that the beams can remain as long as an atheist symbol can simultaneously appear is in keeping with Establishment Clause jurisprudence as we see it. This is because it argues for the equal rights of believers and non-believers. In any event, he says, it is much less of a church-state violation. There, he said it.